What's up everybody and welcome to this episode of GEARIST TV. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Wave Hayate from Mizuno Running. When it comes to products in general, we're really big fans here at GEARIST of things that are built to work together. Now in the running shoe game, this means something that maybe has a road shoe that is a complementary trail shoe so that the runner doesn't have to turn around and adapt to a completely different look, feel, and fit as they go from road to trail. Now, when we saw the Wave Hitogami just a few months ago, we were really excited and really enjoyed this shoe. And this, the Wave Hayate, which we're going to be taking a look at today, it's basically its companion shoe. These shoes are built on a very similar platform, as you can see here, very similar shape, very similar in volume. They're just really similar shoes, and the fit is also very similar. So let's get into the details of the Wave Hayate, and we'll kind of line it up and show you how it compares to the Hitogami at certain aspects of the shoe. As always, the first thing that we're going to take a look at is the outsole, which as you can see in this case is dirty and well loved. First off, it's made from Mizuno's X10 carbon rubber compound. It's a super durable compound that's also meant to be lightweight and add, again, that durability factor that you want in a trail shoe. Now the lug pattern on this is made in these X-gridded kind of little guys here that to me look like little dudes doing jumping jacks if you look closely. Now, each of these, and I'll try to hold it up to the camera, I'm not so sure how well it's going to work, you can see has a lot of little micro nubs. They're calling these studs. Now, each of these little micro nubs forms an additional layer of traction, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. As for the flex grooves on the bottom of the Hayate, you can see that it's quite a bit different. There's far fewer flex grooves than there are on, say, the Hitogami. Now, in a trail shoe in general, you want to have a little more rigid feel because of the terrain you're going to be going on. Generally speaking, that's of course not for everyone, but in general, you want the shoe to be able to help you get over some of that kind of ankle breaker terrain. Now, these flex grooves are, again, very sparse. There are a couple here, these little nicks right here that are going to be slight flex points, but then the big flex point is this kind of X thing right here. This X thing, as I call it, is called the X static ride, which as you can see is meant to give torsional flex to the shoe right underneath the arch there. So that's a nice feature to be able to have some kind of foot functionality play into the ride of the shoe. Now usually I'd reserve the traction talk of any given shoe to the ride section of the review, but because I just came back from a trip where I got to run on these in terrain that I normally don't get to run on, I want to talk about it first. So I just got back from a trip to the Adirondack Mountains, which is in upstate New York. Really, really wonderful place to go. Lots of lakes. We were on the lake there. And I had the opportunity to run on a trail that has a lot of kind of wet to it. There's a lot of wet, there's a lot of green. The majority of the trails that I run on here in Colorado are going to be very, very dry. They're rocky. Not that the trail in New York wasn't rocky, but it's not wet. I don't get to run over leaves and peat and moss and rocks that are slick and roots that are slick and things like that. And I did get the chance to run over these while up in the Adirondacks. And I have to say, and actually in the video diary series that we're doing right now, I commented on that. These handled marvelously over all those things. Now, I was shocked because, you know, you step on a wet root or something. The day I went out running in these, it had been raining for about 24 hours, and I just kind of stuck to it. It was really fantastic traction. Are the lugs the deepest thing in the world? No, and we're going to get into that in a little bit more in a minute, but they did a really great job of sticking to everything that I basically stepped on. Another impressive thing about the outsole that really showed up on the muddy kind of rainy run that I was on is because the lug spacing is pretty far apart. As you can see, they're not really closely jammed in together. The mud clearance was excellent on this. I was on more peaty, kind of mossy type stuff, but when I did go through some mud, it cleared away really, really well. I didn't have to knock it off or anything like that. The other thing is durability. This has about 35 to 40 miles on it, give or take, and there's really, aside from being dirty as all get out, there's really no wear to speak of. So durability is excellent. Traction, I really enjoyed the traction on this. Again, we're going to talk about this in the ride section. Not necessarily set up for super technical loose terrain, but again, as a general utility shoe, this is fantastic traction. Now, as we move up into the midsole of the shoe, this red part right here, we run into Mizuno's ubiquitous wave plate. This guy right there, and you can't see it on the outsole of this, but it's right here, it goes around the heel. Now, in the heel, it is concave, which basically means that it forms a nice heel cup. To me, this gives a sense of stability when your heel is on the ground. What Mizuno advertises this as, partially, is to give you stability when you're landing with your heel on the ground. I don't want to get into this too much, but you could also just land more in your forefoot or midfoot and not have to worry about the stability of rolling a heel or something. So, that's another day. The primary material for the midsole, as it is in most of Mizuno's shoes these days, including the Hitogami, is euphoric foam, U4IC. This euphoric foam is lighter than traditional EVA and also more resilient, which means basically bouncy. It's going to come back a little bit better than traditional EVA. Now let's get into the drop for a second. The drop is basically the difference in height from the heel to the forefoot of a shoe. Now, on Mizuno's website, they advertise this as having a 9mm heel ball offset or 9mm drop. Now, for me, I really like to see a shoe that's 6mm and below. Again, Mizuno's out advertising 9mm, but Running Warehouse, which does independent measurements, they advertise a drop of 6mm, which is 21mm in the heel and 15mm in the forefoot. Now, as I mentioned in the Hitogami, it doesn't feel, because that's also advertised as a 9mm drop shoe, it doesn't feel 9mm. Now, maybe that's just me, and maybe there's, there are manufacturing tolerances and things like that, but it doesn't feel like that. Again, we're going to go with Running Warehouse's number on this to say that it's 6mm or below easily, and that's the way that it ran for me. I've got to tell you that I really did enjoy running in this shoe with the feel of the midsole, and the primary reason for that is that the Hitogami right here is very, very similar feeling. I mean, the shoes are practically identical when you look at them from this angle. Now, the thing about it, and I heard several people mention this, or a few people mention this rather, when this shoe is getting ready to come out, is that this is more rigid than the Hitogami through the midsole and everything. And that's true, it is. But again, if you're on trail that's going to be flexing the foot a lot more and requiring this kind of motion, it should be more rigid. A road shoe is just on a road. It's just on a flat road primarily, or that's its use, or on a track or something like that. For this, it's meant to be on stuff that's going to be off camber, that's going to be asking more from the foot. So a little bit of rigidity is actually a really good thing in my opinion. And this does a nice job. It's not rigid, it is more rigid than the Hitogami. Also in the midsole, since somebody's going to ask, most definitely, there is no rock plate. However, I didn't really notice too much of that. Yes, you can feel the ground, and which is actually a good thing from time to time. But the lugs also do a good job of keeping some distance away from you and some kind of really gnarly type of stuff on the ground. Now let's talk about the upper. Now, I don't typically comment on the design of shoes and the way that they look, mainly because I didn't go to the Fashion Institute or anything like that. And I like louder colors, and some people don't, but I feel like I want to comment on this because it's such a cool looking upper. Like they did with the Hitogami with the kabuki mask, this is a really cool, just kind of Japanese heritage upper. Really great looking. Now, while the colors are actually pretty subtle, they're kind of a black to blue to pink to red kind of thing going on in here. The colors are subtle, but the design is not so subtle. They're pretty loud, and the version of the women's shoe of this is almost exactly the same, except for the midsole is blue instead of this red. I really, really enjoy this. I think it's just a really cool, really slick looking upper with this kanji script here. I can't find the translation of it, which is killing me, so if you can read kanji, tell me what that means, if you can get past the logo there. Anyway, just a really cool looking upper that I think it's just awesome. I like it. The support structure of the upper, so as to not get in the way of the design, but also to keep it really minimal and sleek, is made from clear, which you're probably not going to be able to see on camera. I'll kind of rotate the shoe a little bit. Is made from clear heat welded overlays. So these are basically very similar to the way that other shoes are overlaid with their materials. In this case, it just happens to be clear again, so you can see the really cool design behind it. They're meant to work with the foot. We've seen other companies recently come out with shoes where the upper is trying to, rather than just kind of be an upper that's supported in places that traditionally wear, this is meant to work with the foot. This is called Mizuno's Dynamotion Fit, and I have to say that it does a good job. It's hard to show when I'm not wearing it really, but there's very little kind of buckling. There's obviously a little bit right here, but you can see that it's not so much folded buckling as it is just kind of rolling. This is a really comfortable upper. The whole thing is made of mesh, single piece construction on the outside. The mesh is really nice and breathable, and internally it's not very conducive, in my opinion, to sockless wearing. Now, again, I have said this in every single review I've ever done, I believe, but I prefer to wear socks almost all the time. I'm not somebody who wants to save the time in like a triathlon transition or something to not wear socks. It's not worth it because I can spend 30 seconds putting socks on and then run faster because I won't have blisters later. And I have sissy feet, apparently. So, in this shoe, I don't necessarily think the internal structure is conducive to non-sock wearing. It's comfortable, and I've certainly walked around in it, and there are no sharp edges or anything, but the seamless appearance on the outside has some reinforcing factors on the inside that just kind of feel like they would over time not feel that comfortable. So wear socks. Never had any problems, not a single problem in this with socks on. The heel counter is a fairly traditional height. It comes up right to there, and fairly traditional rigidity. One thing that I do like about it is it comes farther forward. The heel counter ends right about there, so right at the back of the arch. This is nice because if you're on an off-cambered surface or something like this, you're going to feel that additional support from the heel and basically feel more secure in keeping that shoe as a more closely knit extension of the foot. Now let's talk about the fit. As with the Hitogami, I really liked the fit of the Hayate. It's a very close to the foot, minimal feel, and it does a really nice job. As also with the Hitogami, there could be a little more room on the lateral toe box area. It's not a deal breaker, it doesn't put pressure on my toe or anything, but I would like to see my toes splay just a hair more. There's not a lot of vertical space in as far as being able to wiggle the toes up and down like this. Again, just like there is in the Hitogami. However, this mesh has a little bit of give, and with the Dynamotion fit and leaving this, the vamp area, which there's no technical vamp in this shoe, able to give like this, you can see that there is a little more room for the foot to be able to kind of play around in there if needs be. Also, I should mention that as with the Hitogami, sizing is dead on. Let's talk about the ride of the shoe. Now, last October of 2013, I had the chance well before the shoe came out to get a wear test in them, to basically go to a Mizuno thing and run in this shoe way before it was come out. I don't even think it was named at that point. I'm not sure. I didn't have the Hitogamis at that point for sure, but the Hayate was something I was really looking forward to trying out. Now, when I got this on the brief run that I got a chance to run in it with, I knew that it was something that I was going to really be looking forward to running in. It's a more minimal shoe. It's not minimalist by any stretch of the imagination, but it's more minimal compared to some trail shoes, to a lot of trail shoes, in fact. It's pretty nimble. Again, that rigidity, which it's not a rigid shoe, but it does give a lot of good response when on the trail. The ground feel, because of its low stack height and 15 millimeters in the forefoot, does a really good job. You feel the ground under you. There's no rock plate that could possibly deaden the sense, and the lugs being wider spaced offers a more nimble and just quick feel. It's also nice and light for a trail shoe. This guy is a size 11 and it comes in at 9.9 ounces. So it's not the lightest shoe in the world, but it is nice and light, and again is comparable in feel to the Hitogami. So if you're a fan of the Hitogami and you want to put on a shoe on a trail that is going to be close in relation to that shoe, this is really a good way to go. I have to say a caveat about the traction of this when it comes to ride. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. When you're getting on more steep ascending or descending terrain that's a little more loose, much more technical, lots more rocks and pebbles and sand and dirt and things like that, these lugs aren't really, you can see they're not very deep, so they're not going to bite as much as you might get in, say, a different, more long-lugged shoe. That's fine. This, again, is not a super technical terrain trail shoe. Can you take it on technical terrain? Absolutely, and people have, and I have, and it does a decent job. However, you want a little bit more bite on some of those things, and these lugs, while they do a good job, aren't necessarily going to be up for the task on a lot of loose, more technical terrain like that. And a caveat to the caveat, I should mention that if there were super long technical lugs on this, it wouldn't be as versatile a shoe as this is. You can take this on fire roads, you can take this on single track, you can take this on some more technical stuff with ankle breakery type stuff, but if you had long lugs on it, you're going to want to reserve it for technical trail. This is not that. This is a much more versatile shoe. At $110, only $10 more than the Hitogami, this is a well-priced shoe. I mean, it's right there where a lot of its competitors are, and for what you're getting for your bang for your buck and the complement to the Hitogami, it's a really great price. As of right now, I can't really think of two shoes that complement each other quite so well. Again, these are basically built on the same exact platform. They're just kind of a little bit more adapted to the different types of terrain that they're appropriate for. For me, whether you're liking the Hitogami or you're in another shoe, if you're looking for a shoe that's quick and it's lightweight and it's just a really good utilitarian trail shoe, the Hayate is definitely something that you should take a look at. Now let's knock out our ratings real quick. First up is construction, for which we're going to give it 4 stars. Next up is durability, also 4 stars. Comfort, we're going to give it 3.5 stars. For both fit and weight, we're also going to give it 4 stars. And for performance, primarily because it's a well-performing shoe that also complements a great road shoe, we're going to give it 4.5 stars. Now our question for you is, do you have a couple pairs of shoes that complement each other really well, that you feel like you can wear on the road and then turn around and put on the other pair and run on trail without much of a transition in between the two? Please leave your answers in the comments section below. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of GEARIST TV. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below and we're happy to answer them. Also, don't forget to follow us on all social media, which you can see right here. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, what am I forgetting? YouTube, that you're watching right now. Duh, watch all these things, check it out. Also, please don't forget to swing over to GEARIST.com where all of our reviews live. You can check them out there. You can leave comments there. We like to hear from you. Right now, I am in training for Ironman Chattanooga 2014. If you'd like to follow my video diary about that, be sure to subscribe to this channel or just click that little icon right up there, the GEARIST thing, and you can take a look at all of our videos, which will include the playlist of my training for Ironman Chattanooga 2014. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.